The next panel is Thomas Hillgardner, Association of Cable Access Producers, Mark Brunner from Shure Incorporated, which was mentioned earlier, David Donovan from MST, and James Smith.
My name is Thomas Hillgardner, and thank you for hearing me today, and thank you for having this important hearing. I'm speaking on behalf of the Association of Cable Access Producers, and also, I believe, all activists who are interested in more open access to the Internet and a greater variety of media sources. We're calling on the City Council to reject the resolution or to reword it. We initially started, ACAP initially started as an advocacy organization. Our focus was limited to public access television, but with the changing landscape of the media, we've gotten into other areas. And one of these changes is the adoption of digital broadcasting technologies, and that has brought along many changes in the industry and many efficiencies that permit more efficient use of radio spectrum. While it was necessary many years ago for as we are aware that for the FCC to set aside this space, it's valuable now and it can be put to a higher use than it's being put to now. The concerns that were addressed here earlier by the Broadway folks and certainly by the broadcasters in the NFL, et cetera, they are important, but we don't really believe that I got to support the comments of the gentleman from Microsoft. It seems to be a win-win situation. I think that the situation is very much overblown. The current legislation appears to be an effort responding just to these narrow interests and preventing the opening of the spectrum for general use by the public. I think with regard to the field tests that were recently done, particularly with the Philips, and the point was previously made that false positives are not a problem. They're actually a problem for the maker of the device, and that if anything, you'll probably that these devices should work wonderfully and not interfere at all. At least the Philips device would seem, from my judgment, would seem to have been proven by these most recent tests. It's time to end the digital divide. It's really important to do that. This is a way that a new technology can open up and more people will have access. Technology like Skype permits the immigrant communities of Queens, where I'm from, to be able to make very cheap telephone calls that otherwise they presently are making with very expensive prepaid phone cards that sometimes people get ripped off on. It'll permit communication and it'll improve the quality of life for immigrants and the poorest in our community. At the end of the day, these wireless communication companies and some of the folks here were not the people who elected you, these narrow interests. It's the people here that you've got to serve. So I'd ask you to consider those. Thank you very much.
Mr. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Council. My name is David Donovan. I'm president of MSTV. We are the engineering arm of the television broadcast industry. There's been a lot of discussion, and I will submit my written statement for the record, but what I'd like to do is engage a conversation here. There has been a lot of discussion today about the digital divide. And one of the key issues as we're going forward right now with the digital transition, because we did much of the engineering work that underpins that digital transition, is that if you allow unregulated, unlicensed devices in the television band, one of the key folks that are going to get interfered with are over-the-air digital television viewers. Why are we so concerned about this? In the old days with analog television, if you had interference, you saw some wavy lines, you saw some sparkles, your dad's running a high-speed drill or a hairdryer in your house, you could deal with that. But when you get interference with over-the-air digital television, even as the FCC found, even the smallest amounts of interference can lock and freeze a picture. Now, we have been involved in this for over a decade. It is in part because of our engineering working with the FCC that allowed channels 52 to 69 will now be given for Wi-Fi, WiMAX uses. That spectrum is in the process of being auctioned off now, and also for public safety. What we're really talking about here are the remaining portion of the broadcast band. A third of it has already been given away. We're talking about the remaining two-thirds, channels 2 through 51. Now, There has been a lot of discussion here today that we can get broadband throughout New York City. And the purpose of using this spectrum, of course, is for long-range type communications. You can use this spectrum, works very, very well for long-range communications, which makes it ideal for rural broadband. There is spectrum out in rural areas because nobody lives there. There are fewer television stations. There are fewer wireless microphone uses. But when you get into New York City, it is incredibly congested. So when folks tell you that there is plenty of spectrum that can be used here, you have to dig a little deeper and look at the underlying engineering assumptions that say whether or not that spectrum is available. Let me explain just a couple of things. The interference that's going to occur is not interference of the broadcast towers, broadcast antennas on Empire. That's not going to happen. The interference occurs in the back of your television set, in the rabbit ears on top of the set, or the antenna on your roof. Now, how can a small device interfere with a television set? It doesn't make sense. Picture it this way. You're at a lighthouse on the beach. If you stand near that lighthouse, you see a huge light. But if I go a mile or two down the beach, and I stand there with a flashlight, 10 meters away or 10 feet away from you, and I flash that in your eyes, you will see the flashlight before you will see the pin dot from the lighthouse. The interference that's going to occur to consumers is precisely that. It's how much signal you're getting to the back of your television set versus how much power or signal is coming out of an unlicensed device. And when you get into the personal and portable devices of the types we are talking about here, the interference risks are significant. They will come from your neighbors. They could come down the street. You won't know where that interference is coming from. So let's talk about two things here. Co-channel interference. Can you operate an unlicensed device on the same channel folks are trying to watch? After the transition, CBS in town here will be on channel 33. Can I operate an unlicensed device on channel 33 and will it cause interference? The answer is yes. And in fact, that co-channel interference will go for kilometers. I will get back to my friend from Microsoft's analysis that you can do that at the same time because candidly from a technical standpoint that's not quite right. If you have two signals coming from two different devices, one from a broadcast tower and one from an unlicensed device at the same time, that will cause interference. That interference will be for kilometers. But the second type of interference is what we call adjacent channel interference. That is when you buy a television set and you're trying to watch channel 33, can I put a device on channel 34 and operate on channel 32? Whether that works depends on your television set. And the television sets manufactured today are unable to block out or reject those signals on either side. What does that mean? If you're at home or you're in an apartment and your next door neighbor fires up one of these devices on channel 34, it will interfere with your television reception. Now, will walls diminish this problem? I guess we get into sort of the questions of building codes. You get into the questions of whether you can use these unlicensed devices near windows. It becomes an incredibly complex problem. But the key point here is that the interference will occur. So how do you avoid it? Everyone agrees there's interference. How do you avoid it? The first step was sensing, and that has been tested by the FCC for the last several years. Candidly, the tests that were conducted in Maryland indicate failure. Now, the inability to sense ranges. The sensing error rate ranges anywhere between 27 to 37% for the devices that were tested by the FCC. We get to the question of, is a false positive good? The reason why false positives should not be considered as being effective solutions is it's sort of like taking the SAT and you checked all the boxes off and then submitted and said, yes, look, I got the right answer. If you make something so sensitive that it starts picking up everything from background noise to signals way far away, hundreds of miles away. That's not a device you can sell. So as a result, you have to make it less sensitive. And Philips has had 4 years to produce even a prototype lab device to work, and they haven't. Microsoft has submitted a number of devices. 2 of them failed in the recent tests. It just died. One died the year before. I2Art, I think, is the Singapore device that has been submitted. That has also failed. So the ability to use sensing to differentiate between when a channel is being occupied and when a channel is not being occupied, it just simply doesn't work. On adjacent channel, the FCC's own analysis indicates that if you operate these devices on adjacent channels, you are going to cause interference. I will get into some of the studies that were mentioned in particularly the University of Kansas. We can talk about that. But the bottom line is that if you operate on that adjacent channel, you have a problem. Now, Motorola will tell you that they have a device that works just fine on the adjacent channel. Their technology that they're developing with geolocation. You need to dig a little deeper into that, because what it says is this: I'm going to develop a formula. And that formula says at very weak signals at the outer edges of a station's contour, let's say in Westchester County, or you get out into Jersey, where the station signal is really weak, they will reduce their power. But as I get closer to the broadcast tower, I will increase my power. Okay? Here's the problem. In highly congested metropolitan areas, folks are getting their signals through rabbit ears, through walls. You can't make that probabilistic analysis. Someone can be living a mile or 2 away from Empire State and get an extremely weak signal. So if you go down that road, you are going to have problems in high-density areas. Now, who gets hurt? The folks who get hurt here are several. First, your free over-the-air TV viewers in New York City. And your nationwide averages, I mean, you're running between 19% of the population, in some communities up to it's more than a third. In particular, in Hispanic communities, in poor communities, and with the elderly who rely very heavily on free over-the-air TV, they are the ones who are going to be most susceptible to damage here. The second folks who get hurt are you. It's all of us. And it's because with live news, during emergency situations, apart from folks not being able to get it on their television set, we are using wireless microphones day in and day out, not just at fixed locations, but around the city, bring live news and emergency events. The solutions that have been proposed to date, in particular the beacon, are not going to resolve those problems. Remember, if these devices can't sense a broadcast signal, how are they going to sense a beacon? The sensing piece is problematic. In addition, don't underestimate the problems with cable. The National Cable and Telecommunications Association just filed data with the FCC indicating that unless you limit the power of these devices to under 10 milliwatts, I don't want to get too, egghead on you here, but you're going to run and create direct pickup interference to cable systems. So if you look at where we are now, and I do have a number of responses to Motorola and Microsoft in particular, which I'd like to get to in questioning. But essentially, unlike wireless microphones that are involved with professional engineering, these products are designed for consumer use throughout the area. There is absolutely no way that if an error is made, if a device breaks and it turns on to channel, that you can ever control the interference from these devices. The FCC can't recall them. Indeed, think about it. If suddenly your set gets interfered with, how would you know where it's coming from? How could you police it? And the ability to do that at the border is problematic. So, in closing, New York is significant and unique because of the Broadway interest, because of its sports, because it's a center of film. But I'd ask you to think about the number of viewers in your market, in your districts, that rely on free over-the-air television for their information, basic information and entertainment. they shouldn't be lost. I mean, that digital divide needs to be closed so that they can continue to get service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next? Do you want to go next? Mr. Brunner?
Good morning, Chairperson Brewer, members of the committee. My name is Mark Brunner. I'm the Senior Director of Public and Industry Relations for Shure Incorporated, the worldwide leading manufacturer of wireless microphones. It's also nice to see some of our wired microphones used to capture today's hearing. Thank you for inviting me to participate today. The panel of experts you've assembled is impressive, and I'm particularly pleased that you've taken the time to hear directly from the Broadway League. The League has been a thought leader at the Federal Communications Commission and in Congress on the white spaces issue, so it's certainly appropriate that you've heard from them today. The amount of wireless audio used on Broadway throughout each and every performance is dramatic, and the reps here have told you in great detail about how their mics are deployed and how Broadway contributes in such a significant way to the city's cultural and economic well-being. As bright as the lights of Broadway are, however, I think it's equally important for the Council to keep in mind the multitude of other wireless microphone uses in the city. To introduce these venues to you, let me drop a few names you're familiar with. Radio City Music Hall, the Ed Sullivan Theater, Madison Square Garden, Rockefeller Center, the Javits Center, Yankee and Shea Stadiums, both old and new. The diversity of events, from ball games to political conventions, from corporate seminars to news broadcasts, is tied together by a common production infrastructure in which thousands of wireless microphones, and not to mention in-ear monitors and behind-the-scenes intercoms, are deployed on the stages, sets, streets, studios, and sidelines of New York City. These major venues with huge demands for wireless audio infrastructure provide an important cultural and economic benefit for this city, the state, and the entire region. These world-renowned venues, however, are just a fraction of those potentially impacted by the FCC's white spaces decision. In fact, it is the smaller venues, the nightclubs, college sports broadcasts, churches, hotels, and off-Broadway and nonprofit theaters who will feel an even bigger pinch from an ill-advised FCC decision due to budget constraints in an economically challenging environment. If the new white spaces have the potential for the debilitating interference to wireless microphones that we saw throughout the FCC's recent field test at the Majestic Theater, tens of thousands of wireless microphones deployed on a daily basis in New York City could quickly turn from completely reliable to randomly functional. The high population density of New York already makes coordination of wireless audio extremely challenging. In fact, Times Square has been described by audio professionals as the most difficult spectrum environment in the world. Introducing personal wireless devices that operate in the same spectrum to the general public is, in the minds of those professionals, a formula for disaster. The city's institutions can't afford to simply trash their audio technology investments, and the FCC policy should not require them to, when there is no available substitute for these high-quality professional products. The bottom line, the FCC is being pressured by white space device advocates to make their decision before President Bush leaves office and the new president appoints his own commissioners at the FCC. We think that to force an arbitrary political deadline on such an important technical decision does a disservice to the many legitimate stakeholders in this debate here in New York City and in other major news and entertainment hub markets like Chicago, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Nashville, and many others. The original primary goal of the white spaces proceeding was to deliver broadband access to underserved rural areas of the country. And the pro-audio industry wholeheartedly supports this. But now we face a very different dynamic with much more severe consequences for our country's urban centers of commerce and culture. The FCC has proposals before it that we believe make sense and attempt to forge a reasoned solution. Simply put, we're encouraging the Commission to reserve sufficient spectrum for wireless microphone use that meets everyday needs and is scalable to accommodate large events. We also encourage further research on interference mitigation technologies, some of which you've heard about today, that will inevitably be required in the future as an increasing population of wireless products is deployed throughout the nation. We do not, however, support blind faith that these technologies are ready for mass production until they are demonstrated to be viable both in the lab and in the field. Today, however, particularly for cities like New York, where the white spaces are really dark gray spaces. There needs to be clear priority for wireless microphone operation before white space devices may send out any transmission signals. We're hopeful that the advocates for the new devices will see the wisdom of this approach in order to move forward with innovation without moving backward on communications, arts, and culture. Last week, I was rereading some of the FCC filings from two of the outstanding members of Congress from New York, Representatives Maloney and Nadler, and I was once again reminded that no city, no region will feel the impact of interference from white space devices than right here in New York. The culture and economic risks are significant and real, and the entire production community employed in this city is gravely concerned about the outcome. There simply is no second chance for a live performance. Please accept my company's appreciation for inviting me to testify here before you today. It is our hope that the Council adopts the pending resolution in a New York minute. I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Sir, would you like to testify?
Yes, I'm a citizen producer through Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I produce a program.
Identify yourself, sir.
Yes, my name is James Smith. I am a citizen producer at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I produce a program called A Reader's Channel. It's a program designed to stimulate people to read more. And this issue came to me through a group for the elderly. I was excited when I bought the analog converter box because I noticed that there were extra channels for each channel. Channel 4 has 3 extra channels, and the same with most of the other channels. And I saw that as a potential opportunity for public access, because public access on cable is limited, because it goes only to subscribers who can afford $100 a month. It's very expensive. And the white space issue might present us with the possibility of internet transmission, which we have, but it is weak. It is not a strong transmission. And so I was excited. I wondered about these extra channels. How, you know, what were they about? And I did a little research, and I was told that you were capable of splitting a single channel into several channels. Unfortunately, this issue was not mentioned anywhere in all the promotion of DTV on television, and the different stations were using things such as weather, and another station was presenting church programs, and a few were using for infomercials, which we certainly don't need any more of. And I was excited, but there was a gentleman who was at the a meeting who mentioned who was there because of white space. I asked him what was the possibility of that, and he said, well, it would be the internet. It would reduce the cost for broadband, which is very significant, because public access, as we have it now, isn't really public access. It's only to people who have subscriptions to cable. And the internet at the moment is not that strong. I've wondered why the streaming hasn't been fortified as lately. I suspect it's a political reason more than anything else, frankly. But if the white space can provide us with cheaper broadband access, I'm certainly for it. And I'm trying to learn more about it, and that's why I came to testify.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all your work at M&N. We certainly have a show there, and we love it. I guess I would say for Mr. Donovan, just to maybe you want to respond to some of the things that Motorola and Microsoft were talking about, but also maybe you could just explain for the people who are getting educated today, the DTV transition will create more white space, but that's also got some nuances to it. So I'm just wondering if you could explain that and maybe just pick up on some of Mr. Smith's ideas about could there be more broadcast?
Sure. A number of things here. Because channels 52 to 69 will no longer be part of the television band, you have to take all those channels that are on those frequencies now and move them down into channels 2 through 51. They have to be moved. In addition, you have a number of low-power stations, and I have the full list of low power here, and I won't go through it. It is quite lengthy in New York, of stations that are in New York. You also have every wireless, the Commission has a proposal in front of it now that says every wireless microphone that currently operates on channels 52 to 69, and there are a lot of them, they also are getting kicked out of that band and will have to move into channels 2 through 51. So the argument that with the digital transition that there will be a significant amount of room on channels 2 through 51, most of that room is going to be down in between channels 2 through 4, 2 through 5 in particular. And the reason is broadcasters are moving out of those channels because of interference with, frankly, your power grids. As I said before, even a little bit of digital interference locks in. Analog, you never saw it, you see it in digital. So the heaviest congested area is going to be in between channels 20 and 51. And the white space proponents want to focus their attention for the most part on channels 21 through 51, which is extremely congested. The second piece in dealing with the multicasting. With digital, we are able to subdivide our existing allocation. We get 6 megahertz, and you're able to subdivide that and to develop new uses with it. Consumers that are getting the digital over-the-air converter box that the government is pushing will now, for the first time, be able to access those channels on their old analog television sets. That is, and I agree with you, we have not publicized enough, that is a significant benefit to the American consumer. The problem is that is a digital tuner in that box, and that tuner is susceptible to the interference caused by the white space devices. So the good news is you'll get more channels. The bad news is as you go down the road, they are more susceptible to interference, and now you're going to have problems. To respond to some of the, I mean, my wife tells me that I can fill a room forever, so please.
Don't do that.
Just a couple of things. I think one of the key things here is that the whole goal of reducing broadband costs, which is an important part of this debate, none of the proponents here are guaranteeing in any way, shape, or fashion that you're going to get free broadband. There's only one video source in America today that you get for free, and that is for the price of an antenna and a $40 converter box, you get over-the-air television broadcasting. So as you're working out the economic equities, I ask you to really begin to focus on that. Now, my friends from Motorola talk about geolocation. And geolocation is an interesting thing to look at. Of course, it really hasn't been thoroughly tested at the FCC. There were some tests in Maryland, and they were done by manually inputting data. But if you go with a geolocation system, and you also want to protect wireless microphones, that database is going to have to include, obviously, your TV stations, your low-power TV stations, all your wireless microphone uses, schools that use wireless microphones, city council chambers to the extent you use wireless microphones, every church and synagogue, and every theater. You will also have to make sure you deal with cable head ends and satellite uplink facilities. That can be done. It isn't easy. The question, though, is as you begin to protect every school, is there going to be sufficient room to actually do the broadband services that are so advertised here in urban markets? Where I think you're really running with this in urban areas, and which is why some of these folks are really into this, is you're talking about smaller systems, in-home wireless networking, game controllers, those types of devices. And candidly, there's other spectrum to use that. The arguments that you talk about the spectrum having great propagation characteristics, in urban areas it also means it has greater interference characteristics. Now, on beacons, just so you understand on beacons, One, they have never been tested by the FCC. Two, if a device has trouble sensing the existence of a broadcast signal, which is in a megawatt range, I don't know how well it's going to sense a 250 milliwatt beacon. Three, if it is shouting as loudly as my friend from Microsoft says, that too will cause interference. Four, it is very inefficient. If I, God forbid, have another event in this city or a major event, and all the news trucks go together, and this is what I'm concerned with is local news, I now have to start putting up beacons. And a large chunk of the spectrum that I could be used for news reporting, I am now going to have to use for essentially these jamming beacons. It is very problematic. I think one of the things you need to remember is, and it goes to the fundamental question, does the FCC have enough data to make a decision? Right now, after 4 years of working on this, no sensing device has worked. They have failed. Indeed, the Microsoft device, I'm happy he's for a win-win situation, but he hasn't produced a device that works, even in a lab. The closest you get is the Philips device, which registers every channel is occupied. It's sort of like taking your grandmother's hearing aid and turning it up real loudly. You can't live or market a device that does that. So what you're asking the Commission to do is to guess, and indeed to go forward with a technology that has proven that it does not work if it's sensing, with geolocation, a system that has just marginally been tested. And I submit, if you go down that road, when the government goes to certify these things, all certification says is that this device was built to the rule. If you get the rule wrong, that certification almost becomes meaningless.
Thank you very much. Have any questions?
Could you just talk a little bit about the tests that were performed and the false positive?
Sure.
Could you just go over that one more time?
Yes. One of the issues, and it is in my testimony, it is correct the FCC has not produced its results on this. What you have in my testimony, we had an observer who was a former head of the FCC's engineering arm looking at all these tests. And here's how it goes. The key thing about sensing is you have to be able to differentiate between a signal that is being used and when a signal that isn't being used. One of the problems with the Philips device is that no matter where it was, it said all signals are being used. That even occurred during a lab test inside an anechoic chamber. This is a giant spectrum meat locker where no signals come in and come out. It is clear, and I think it was admitted up here, is that what you're doing is if you crank up the sensing so much, it will always say that spectrum is being used, that channels are being occupied. Now, their conclusion is, hey, don't worry, I'll never interfere with you. But the real question for policymakers, do you have a device that works? In other words, can you put an attenuator or can you ratchet down the sensitivity so that it actually does differentiate? Because you and I both know that they could never sell a device in the marketplace that essentially never turns on or does what it's supposed to do. They have to ratchet it back, and they've been unable to do so.
And last question to the gentleman from Shure Incorporated. You mentioned Congressmember Maloney and Nadler. Has any other member of Congress in the New York delegation, have they come out with an opinion, i.e. Chairman Charlie Rangel or any other members of the caucus, the Hispanic caucus, the Black caucus? Have they taken a position on this?
Yes.
They have?
Yes, you've had over 80 letters from members of Congress to the FCC. I believe Congressman Engel has sent a letter down. I'm not sure. I need to double-check my records as to Congressman Fasella. In addition, Congressman Gonzalez.
Velasquez?
I'm sorry?
Congresswoman Velasquez from Brooklyn? Has she taken
I'll check my files. I don't believe so.
Could you forward a copy of that letter to the committee?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Congressman Gonzalez, who is a leading member of the Hispanic caucus as well. No, not Rangel.
Given this discussion today, one of the questions I have is, do you see that there is a time when the television and the opportunity for the devices to work and the wireless microphones to work in some way, shape, or form? Do you see that? How do we get to this place?
To be blunt, you could have had rural broadband and TV white spaces in this country several years ago. Canada's doing it. They're using a licensing approach. We've never opposed this. The problem is when you get into urban areas where spectrum is congested and you have high-density living, your problems increase. I do not believe at this point, given the architecture of broadcasting and the way digital signals work, where you don't have a signal over here and you move 5 feet and you get a perfect signal, that sensing is going to be an effective tool to avoiding interference. Geolocation, assuming you get the database done right and you get the rules done right, is something that's worth exploring. I just don't think it's soup yet.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. It's a great, helpful panel, and we look forward to more discussions. Just so everyone knows, we're not going to be voting on the resolution today, and so we will be voting on it in the near future. We will let people know, but it will not be today.